guys, how are ya? So here we are, another blog, and I promised that our blogs in 2012 are going to be very how-to oriented, right? So last year we talked about a lot of stuff, a lot of the reasons behind why we're here and our sales philosophy and our customer philosophy and why we do what we do. We talked a lot about that, and I think you guys have gotten a good understanding of who we are and who our identity is in the international marriage business, if you will. But in 2012, our focus is to give you guys how-to information, specific how-to stuff that's going to enable you to stop watching the blog and then go out and do something definitive as you move forward in the process of finding that life partner. So we got to kind of do some groundwork around that, right? We've got to set the foundation for you so that when you go forward and you encounter roadblocks or hurdles or things, barriers that you have to get beyond, that you've got a good understanding of why we're here and why some things are the way that they are and why our processes are in place. That's going to enable you to feel confident about what you're doing as you write those letters and book your romance tour and do your fiancé visa application, etc. So we've been talking a little bit about why foreign women seek husbands from abroad. And I think this will be kind of my closing blog on that topic, but we talked a little bit about it last night on our Monday night conference call, and I want to expand upon some of those themes. So we talked about the kind of women that come to a foreign affair and why they're here in our last video blog, and now I want to talk a little bit more about the cultural aspects of why foreign women decide to join an agency like a foreign affair. So we'll talk about Russia and Ukraine. I kind of lump those two together because culturally they're very, very identical. And then we'll talk about Latin America and then some of the Asian countries that we go to and give you guys a broad understanding of why women are here trying to meet somebody like you in this process for very valid reasons, all right? So guys, do a little research on the internet. It's good to do some research around some of the stuff that I throw out there just so that you can see that the things that I say are very well supported and feel confident in them, and that confidence moves you forward, right? So one of the things that we talk about is that according to the 2010 census in Russia, which is done by the Interior Ministry of Russia, there are 9 million more women than men in Russia. That means 9 million more females of all ages than males of all ages. Now, some of those females are retirees and some of those males are toddlers. They kind of lump them all in together. But if you think about that, you have 9 million females more than males, and as I've said many, many times, if every single male of all ages in Russia were to get married and stayed married, of course they can't, you still would have 9 million more women than men. That is the biggest reason that women come to an agency like a foreign affair in hopes of meeting a life partner. So let's expand that to Ukraine a little bit. We know that according to a 2008 study by the United Nations, pretty valid resource, right? There are 3.5 million more women than men in Ukraine. So again, if every single male of all ages in Ukraine were to get married and stay married, which they can't, there still would be 3.5 million more females, and a good number of them are of marrying age, right? So again, that is the main reason that women come to this process to meet a life partner, because they just don't have enough men in their culture. And so many times over the past 10 years, when talking to a beautiful girl from Ukraine, she'll say to me something like, you know, it's amazing, there are so many women in my city, even the nice guys, even the best guys find it really, really hard to be faithful. There are just too many women, and all of them very, very beautiful, right? You know, we've talked a little bit about some of the things that Russia and Ukraine have done to kind of counter that. So for example, I poked a little fun at this, but in Russia, they actually have a law that went into effect in 2006 that will give $10,000 US to any couple that has a second child. And there was an article that was done by the Christian Science Monitor a couple of years ago, which interviewed some women from Moscow about this new law, and they said, you know, very few people get to take advantage of it because the men don't typically hang around to have that second child. They may have one child and then they're gone, but sticking around, keeping that family intact, and having a second child, even when there's $10,000 US to be offered for that, they just typically don't hang in there and do that. So no matter how much incentive you give culturally, apparently to the men of Russia, there just isn't enough incentive to take advantage of something really huge and impactful like $10,000 US. There's another city in southern Ukraine that has a stay home and procreate day. So this is their idea of a holiday. Let me tell you, that's a holiday, right? We need several of those in America. But the idea is you get paid to stay home and procreate. And how they validate that you were procreating and give you, I don't know how they do, I leave that up to them. But I'm sure that there are ways to do that in Russia. After all, they have the KGB. But anyway, so in Ukraine, guys, again, we're just looking at the broad picture for women who are from Ukraine. But you know, in Ukraine, you've got 80% of the women have a university degree, right? So this is a very, very educated labor pool of women. We know what we can do with women who have degrees here in America and the kind of job opportunities that they get and the laws that we have to ensure that. Well, in Ukraine, even though 80% of the women have degrees, so many of them are in fact underemployed. And by underemployed, I mean that men get the higher salaries. There are no equal wage laws that are involved out there. And when women become single moms, there are child support enforcement laws on the books, but they're rarely enforced. So here you have single moms who are educated in Ukraine, working long, long hours. I've told you guys many times they work about 12 hours a day in most cases. So again, just qualify that, guys. They start at 9 o'clock in the morning. They finish at 9 o'clock at night. Then they get home. Then their evening begins when it comes to getting the kid to any kind of gymnastics or swimming lessons or whatever extracurricular activities they're doing, or just making dinner and spending quality time with their family. That whole thing begins at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night every day of the week, and sometimes they work 6 days a week. So you're beginning to get an understanding of just kind of the daily life of women in Russia and Ukraine. I just remember one thing, I probably mentioned it in a previous blog before, but one thing that's always stood out is something that Victoria told me one time about how women in Russia, especially young women in Russia and Ukraine, when they're applying for work, will actually put at the top of their resume something like no intimate relations. They'll actually put on their resume that they will not negotiate a job with an intimate relation. Isn't that incredible? I mean, obviously that would never and should never happen in our culture, in most cultures, but it can happen in Russia and Ukraine. Again, it just gives you an idea of the daily life of very beautiful, educated, intelligent women in Russia and Ukraine and why they come to this process to meet somebody like you. So then let's talk about Latin America. We know, we've heard so many times, in fact, yesterday, if you were listening to my live chat with Angelica from Cartagena, Colombia, she verified this, that, men in Colombia, men all over Latin America, very handsome, and many of them make great fathers and great husbands, but many of them also have what Colombian women would call machismo, which means essentially that, they want the women to be at home, they don't want them to work, They're strong, masculine men. They definitely lead the family in a dominant kind of way. They don't like independent women, typically. And I know I'm stereotyping, but again, this comes from the women of the countries that I'm talking about. So in Latin America, we know that the men typically are not necessarily faithful, that it's common for them to have mistresses throughout their married lives. And of course, you're talking about women, especially in Colombia, who are good Catholic girls. They have a very moral compass. They have very strong religious values. They're going to get married and stay married. And Colombia has one of the lowest divorce rates of anywhere in the world as a result of this. So these are women who want to choose their one and only life partner very, very carefully. And that is the main reason that they look outside of their culture to meet that life partner. And then you have women from Asia and the Philippines, right? So let's talk about the Philippines. In certain cities in the Philippines, the women outnumber the men. And interestingly, culturally, women in the Philippines have told me time and again, a lot of what drives us to find men from another culture is that we just find foreign men really attractive. So, even average everyday foreign guys are more attractive to us in some cases than our average everyday local men. And that's just something that's really appealing to us. And I know that some guys can relate to that, because if you've been looking at women from the Philippines or women from China or women from Japan, for example, there's just something very exotic and very beautiful sometimes about women from another culture. And every time we see a very beautiful woman from Asia, we react to that, right? I mean, we know that it's like seeing a great painting on a wall. There's just something truly beautiful that just draws our attention when they're passing us on the street. Or in the shopping mall or something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? So in the Philippines, women have very, very strong family values. Divorce is practically illegal in the Philippines. So again, it's get married and stayed married to one faithful spouse who we're very attracted to personally. Women in the Philippines will tell you that they're very passionate women and they want a strong, passionate relationship with their man throughout their entire married lives. And because they find foreign men attractive, it's one of the main reasons that they come to us in hopes of meeting somebody. So again, guys, just surfacely speaking, there are a lot of very, very valid cultural reasons that foreign women come to us, and it's not at all what we think it is, right? So we've had years and years of the media telling us that it's because they want citizenship in our country, or they're poor, dumb, and desperate, living in mud huts and waiting for us to come and rescue them. And usually we go to whatever country we're going to, we get on the ground, and in about 10 minutes we realize that completely is not the case, and that is the first misperception about this whole entire process to go completely out the window for those of us who do get on the plane and go. But remember, guys, that of the majority of men who write letters to foreign women every week through loveme.com, a small percentage of you thus far are actually getting on the plane and going to meet somebody. So a small percentage of you are ever going to realize what a misperception that is. So I hope this video blog set some things straight for you. We'll do more work toward helping you make an impression on these beautiful women as we go forward in our next video blog. Thanks.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Then click on the notice bell to get notified every time we add something new. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google+. Want to learn more? Check out our website, firstlatinwomen.com.